So yeah, I guess today we just kind of wanted to discuss like how you handled the first lockdown and how your businesses are doing in general.
So for me, it's interesting, Angela, that you use the word grim. I think at one stage during the summer, so I'll talk particularly about Amsterdam because that's the one that's been open and been ticking over and had a different way of working. But there was one stage in the summer that things began to pick up a little bit, a lot of staycations. So it was interesting, just briefly talking to Kim beforehand, saying about how you're obviously going into the high season now in South Africa. And I honestly thought there was light at the end of the tunnel in Amsterdam. We were getting a lot of staycations. Obviously, lockdowns had been lifted in a lot of countries because Amsterdam is accessible from the rest of Europe by car or by train. We saw a little pickup in numbers, occupancy numbers, not so much, and average. The ABRs were okay. And then when September came, it all went pear-shaped again. Just when we were thinking this is happening, it's behind us. The staycation stopped, and then more recently, obviously, lockdown restrictions have got a lot stricter. So business has just become more difficult again. And we've actually, business is so difficult with FITs, free independent travellers, that actually we've turned to mid-stay travellers, and it tends to be more students, or what we've noticed is a big uptake in Italians and Spanish that are coming to the Netherlands for work, which is quite sad because it's a reflection on unemployment levels in those Southern European countries. So we've noticed a big, well, when I say big, we're working on numbers of 30% occupancy, but there's a bigger influx of Italians and Spanish, and they're staying with us midterms, and students as well. So we've moved away really from the free independent traveller as needs must at the moment. And in London, whilst we're closed, we're looking at opportunities of maybe housing contractors or charities, but the properties in London are older and they're not really ideal for charities. So we're holding out hope there, but it's not, I'm not sure if it will come to fruition really.
Okay, interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kim, like that, on the same token, like what would you say has like happened with your business during the pandemic?
Awesome, thanks. I mean, Anne, what came to mind, a question that came to mind is your properties in Amsterdam and London. Do you lease them, or are they like, do you own them, or how are they paid off? Like how does that
so we're actually, that's a very interesting thing, because very, very fortunately we're freehold, so we own the properties, I think, and that actually is sort of kept us a little bit feeling a little bit more safe. Two of the smaller properties actually are leaseholds in Amsterdam, and we've had discussions with the landlords. But because we are freeholds, that has definitely been a help. And I've noticed when we have discussions with other hostels, if you are a leaseholder, it is definitely a harder time. You're having to renegotiate your leases, and obviously some landlords are much more flexible than others. And again, it goes, I think, I don't know how it is in South Africa, Kim, with you, but a big thing here has been the government support. So, whereas we've been getting great government support in the Netherlands, so it's been able to keep ticking, we're not getting that same support in the UK, hence we're closed. But you asked, I think the fact that we're freeholds, majority of our properties are freehold, that's been a huge, huge, huge help, and we can sleep a little bit easier. I think leaseholds are trickier, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Yeah. So I guess the pandemic affected our business quite early on. I was quite vocal in the beginning, trying to kind of raise awareness of the fact that it's coming. And so I was in Berlin in the beginning of March for ITB. And as I landed, things just got cancelled and cancelled and cancelled. It was the most bizarre thing. And I mean, thinking back, we still went and had drinks with a bunch of travel bloggers. And we were sort of joking about like wearing masks and doing an elbow punch. And during that night, like one of the tour operators was just like having the worst night, and they just said, I'm from Italy, and I've just cancelled my whole summer. Like my whole summer is just cancelled. I was like, really? Gosh, that's like so hectic. Shame, poor Italy. And then the next day it was like, okay, Germany is starting to cancel. Okay, like Austria. And by the time 4 days had finished, like everyone around us had gone from like, yay, let's meet up to a beer to like, I've just been retrenched so quickly, like so quickly. And I landed like 6 days later back in Cape Town. I was like, guys, how many cancellations have we had? And they were like, no, we haven't had any. And then I was like, watch it, it's coming. And for that, I mean, I landed, I dropped my bags, I went into the office. I was like, guys, it's going to come. The wave is coming. And then, of course, I found out I actually had COVID. So the whole office had to go in quarantine. But I was astounded that 2 weeks later, people were still at the beach, like still having cocktails, still socializing and going crazy. And I was really anxious because I was like, this thing's coming, because I saw how quickly it unfolded there. And so I guess I did what I could to kind of tell people and be quite vocal about my own experience. But then I think the advantage that we had was that we spoke to our landlord, before lockdown was even a discussion. We had these discussions and started planning like a 5-phased approach to what we were going to do if it got severe. And I think that we were probably the first tenant to speak to our landlord. And I'm so grateful, because I think if we had come 2 weeks later, that, people have got fatigued by then. And our landlord was incredible, like very, very supportive, gave us like a substantially, I think in the beginning it was 80% off, and then they've kind of, added on another 10%, another 10%, another 10%. And we're currently on about 50% of rent. So we're still paying significantly more rent than we're getting in revenue. However, I think that the timing was significant. So we came off the back of summer. So in South Africa, especially in Cape Town, it's very, very seasonal, far more than other cities like Joburg. So at the end of summer, we had our cash reserves ready for the upcoming winter, and we were also planning to renovate. So we were literally like holding out onto our cash. And the other thing that saved us was that our financial year end is in end of June. So if our financial year end was end of February, like so many people, I think we would have lost a lot of cash flow to, paying taxes and things like that, which thank goodness we didn't have to do. By the time our financial year end came, we'd burned through everything. So I think that definitely stood in our favor. And then, so obviously adapting was something that came quite early on. We were not very well suited for long-term accommodation because our spaces are quite small. And our rooms are quite small. They're not huge. So we didn't do that straight away. We now are doing quite a few long-term bookings. But really, again, speaking to colleagues in Europe, what we realized was that hotels were closing like just quickly. And as the pandemic was increasing, and people needed to sleep, especially healthcare workers needed a place to sleep. And literally conversation 15th of March with a Dutch guy living in Italy who said, I wish we'd thought of this 2 weeks ago. The hotels are closed now and we have healthcare workers sleeping in their cars, and they don't want to go home because they don't want to help, they don't want to infect their families. But the hotels are closed and they can't reopen. It's too complex. And so I thought, okay, that's maybe where we can help. And I just thought very locally, maybe once in Cape Town can help, maybe once in Joburg can help. And then I realized actually we could probably help all over the country. And that's where sort of on a whim, we built a website, which is Ubuntu Beds, and got so many fantastic accommodations to sign up around the country. And we've been able to accommodate, I think we're close on 18,000 nights now, which is a little bit of revenue back into into hotels, guest houses, apartments. For us, we've also had a few healthcare workers staying with us in Cape Town and in Joburg before we closed down. And it just meant that we had enough to keep the staff, like 8 staff on site, and just enough to keep the building actually going. So yeah, that's kind of where we have been.
And Kim, it's so interesting when you say about how it all came so suddenly, because it's sort of, you were like, oh yeah, a few groups have cancelled. And then you were like, yeah, okay, if we'll manage at 30%, we'll somehow survive this. And then I think for us, the big thing is when Trump announced that and there was to be no European travel, it fell out to 8%. You were just like, wow. And then I think, like all of us in the beginning, it was like, oh, it'll last 3 weeks. Then it was 3 months. Then it was like, oh, by September, it'll all be better. But, now it's like, maybe 2022 is the year. But it did come so quickly. Yeah. And I think we don't know. I think that's the crux of it, is the uncertainty. But I think you've highlighted the need to be flexible and look at different things and be prepared to actually really, be proactive about how to face the challenges, I think.
Yeah, and I think that it was kind of okay for the first time. So, I mean, and then everyone's got COVID fatigue, and everyone has got like hygiene fatigue, and certainly when we saw the first wave kind of go down again, I mean, I remember the day I went to yoga. I could even go back to a yoga class again, like in person. And outside the yoga studio is a square, and they were just like, it was just packed, like full of people drinking beer, like so excited just to be out and like be social. And I must say that and then hearing, or even just conceptualizing that there's going to be a second wave is almost more tiring the second time around, because you kind of know what you're in for. At least the first time we didn't really know what we were in for, and we could deal with it every day. Yeah.
It's like, oh, what's this? There was a slight novelty factor about it. I can assure you it's not better the second time. We definitely have lockdown fatigue. But I think the approach of the government is a little bit more, at least schools are still going here, but that doesn't help tourism, per se.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've spoken to a few sort of, hotel CEOs who and people in the industry who just, who are taking it day by day, which I think is the right approach, because we don't ever know what is going to come. But certainly I think that looking into the future and seeing how governments have reacted, or how consumers have reacted to second lockdowns, gives us here in South Africa a bit of a chance to plan different scenarios of how we might deal with a second wave or with a second lockdown. Because to a certain extent, it's useful to look and see, okay, even countries like Sweden are talking about a mild lockdown when they were very anti it the whole time.
And it's interesting, I think, what you say about how, sorry, I'm jumping maybe a little bit here, but when you say about how consumers are reacting also, I think the first, I don't know about you, and I might be jumping a little bit here, but definitely the first lockdown, I don't think we handled our cancellations very, very well. If people had non-refundables, we were trying to, politely tell them that they had booked the non-refundable, and that was with them, and they should have read the T's and C's. And now it's, I think consumers have become a lot more aware of, well, what are the T's and C's before making the booking? And, I'm even considering booking a holiday for next Christmas, but I'll be a lot more aware of what the T's and C's are. So what's the cancellation policy? Will it be that the deposit is moved out, or will it be that I'll get the deposit refunded in full? So you said about consumers being more aware, and it's definitely, from that point of view, it's slightly easier because the first time we had a lot of irate guests, but I think, you know, we all didn't know which way was up at that moment, and it seemed to be a tornado coming, and we were just caught up in it. But yeah, now this time, I think even, you know, the tourists, the people that are coming, are a lot more savvy about the conditions that tied to the cancellation policies and bookings.
And have you adjusted yours? Have you adjusted your cancellations?
Not so much. I'll say with groups, so with groups prior to COVID, we would be maybe regarding if a group cancelled, or we would be a lot more discretionary about the deposit refund. But now with all groups, their deposit can be moved, so there's no problem moving their deposit. Regarding free independent travellers, I think back to what I said, it's not so much that our policies have changed. I think just the policies are so much clearer and people are reading them. Whereas once people were going, they didn't care if it was a non-refundable deposit or a non-refundable stay, they were just booking it because it was good value. Now they're going, well, will I really be going? Should I buy the flexible rate? Should I buy the non-refundable? And we still have, surprisingly, we have a lot of people booking non-refundable, but what we've noticed is it's either people coming within the next 48 hours, so they're really quite certain, or they're already in-house, so they're not going anywhere.
Got you. Yeah, our booking windows are fairly similar. We've had quite a few people kind of also walking in and wanting to have a look. My sense is that they actually want to also check, you know, does it feel safe? Does it feel secure? Like from a hygiene point of view. And we've had, yeah, so we've had a lot more walk-ins than we would ordinarily have. And then last minute bookings are up, and then bookings for like group bookings for about a year from now, a year, 18 months even from now, we're getting a lot of inquiries. And I think the tricky thing for us is trying to figure out, like, you know, even what rate to charge, because in our case, we took out almost all our dorm beds. We have only 4 beds per room, and so the government restrictions have been quite limiting. And again, we looked at other sort of European or American restrictions, and in most cases it's a 50% occupancy limit. And so we read that to be 2 people in a dorm. Our dorm beds, I was kind of also looking for an excuse to take them down and redesign them and put in new ones over time. And so it was the right time to do it, but it's tricky because tour operators are booking 18 months in advance. A lot of them have come back and said, we want a discount on your 2019 or 2020 rates. So we want a 10% discount. And we want to have, instead of having 4 people in a room, we want to have 2 people in a room.
No.
And when you put that into a spreadsheet, it just doesn't add up. But they're saying, you know, at that price, 10% less our 2019 rates, people are booking. And so we need to get the bookings up again. And so, you know, you either commit or we'll find someone else.
Yeah, our ABRs are a third of what they were last year at this moment in time, you know. But it's interesting what you say. We've had inquiries even for 2022, and you're sort of like, oh, you know, how do you decide on rates for 2020 18 months out? Because either 18 months, even 6 months out to a huge degree, but I know they're already fixed. But you know, it's because once the party gets started again, you know, travel is going to be, you know, all these people have saved up, particularly in the industry that we're in, you know, youth travel, they're going to be so mad keen to travel again. And there is only going to be limited spaces. So it's really hard to decide when can you maybe sit tight or be a little bit more aggressive about your pricing, especially if some of these are allotments rather than actual bookings. I mean, if they were actual bookings and they were paying up front, then you might go, okay, I'll take the money, I'll take the cash now. But, if they're tour operators making requests for 2022 and asking for rates for 2022, that's something that came up this morning in a meeting. And it's something that I've marked down that we have to look at, whereas if you're getting the booking, if you were getting the money up front now, you might go, okay, I'll take, for cash flow, I'll take a good deal. But if it's that they're going to be paying you in 2022 and there's one hell of a party in 2022, then you won't be wanting to give 1/3, our 13 euro bed, which is normally 39 euro bed for 2022 when the lights are back on.
Yeah, absolutely. And so something that I found interesting is that I think that consumer behavior or guest behavior is different, A, to government regulations, and B, sometimes like quite counterintuitive. So, for example, the government regulations say 50% occupancy in common rooms or dorms. So in certain countries, and we have a WhatsApp group for hostel managers and hostel owners, and one of the things that I heard on that group was that people are booking dorms, and 16 sleeper dorms, like the cheapest price basically, and they're like really negatively reviewing the hostel for upholding health and safety regulations at the cost of the social experience. So, we know hostels and we know certain, hospitality products to be all about the social, all about the common areas, whether there's a band or whether there's, a kicking bar or events, and hostel owners and hospitality products are trying their best to uphold all these standards. When you're walking around with a visor and a mask and a screen and a temperature thing, and like young people over the summer in Europe apparently were just like, I don't care about all this stuff. I'm just here to party. Like, did you experience that at all?
It's really interesting. Apparently there was an issue in Amsterdam. I think it was also an issue in Ireland, probably an issue everywhere, of young people, because the pubs were closed and everything, that they were booking hotel rooms and bringing their own drink and having parties in the hotel rooms, rather than, because they couldn't even go home. But actually, it's interesting what you say about the social experience. And so say in Amsterdam, particularly during the summer, the Dutch had taken a very pragmatic approach, and we weren't really, whilst we had everything in order per se. We had, visors, or screens, you had hand sanitizing. We were doing a lot more, well, not so much that we were doing a lot more cleaning, because we were clean anyway, but it was more about performance of cleaning. But we weren't policing it. We were sort of like, separating the tables, and the tables, you're only allowed 2 to a table. So we had everything done as such, but then we weren't policing it. But then there was an incident, it was a group that stayed with us, a small group that stayed with us, and one of them had got COVID either prior to staying with us or after staying with us, but the authorities then followed it back. And whilst they didn't get COVID with us, the authorities obviously looked at the place, and they weren't, whilst, they recognized that we were doing things in order, we weren't being stringent enough policing it. And so we decided, we came on an authority watch list basically, and we had to then be stricter about policing it, which isn't, as exactly to what you're saying, Kim, it doesn't come naturally within a hostel to police a situation. That might be slightly different in a hotel where there's a lot more, it's just different, whereas a hostel is more about the social experience, the interacting. And so we were meeting the regulations, but not policing it. But since that instance, and the authorities, and then obviously been on a watch list, and with more lockdowns in place and more stringent rules, we're policing it now. And but fair play to the staff in Nord, in Clink Nord, they still managed to do social activities. And in our area, we have one area where traditionally it would be a music venue. They've got little X's on the floor so people can dance where the X is, so it's it's trickier, and there are ways around it, but I think you have to be more imaginative. But it's definitely not the same, and we've definitely had to police it, which doesn't come naturally to me any which way.
Totally. I mean, I realized last week with like a bit of a sinking feeling, like, I often just like pop in to the hostel and like do this and do that, and then I'm gone again, and then I'm back again, and I realized like, oh my gosh, I should be checking in with my temperature like every time I do this, And so when I like run in for a meeting, and then and the staff see me coming and going all the time, and it didn't even occur to us. And I said, guys, oh my gosh, I haven't checked in and out actually in like a week. We need to get stricter with this. And it is just quite unnatural. I'm glad, I mean, not glad, but in a way we haven't had that summer yet where we have our typical guests. We've had more long stays, etc. And with them we found like we can get into a groove. But certainly our staff complement is down from like, let's say 25 to 8. We're on a serious, skeleton staff, and creating that vibe and all those things around staying in a hostel is difficult if you have so few staff. So yeah, I think, and in our case in South Africa, we've just, so we have had something called TERS. I actually can't remember what it stands for, but it's for, it's basically unemployment money for people who can't work. And that it's been a wonderful help. So it's just ended now, and it's not going to continue any longer. And so, we're trying to reimagine how do we take all the skills that have been built up in our hospitality staff and repurpose them elsewhere. So, trying to recommend our maintenance manager to go and be a facilities manager in a different business, and then getting a receptionist to work as a medical receptionist. So really trying to reimagine all these skills, because as long as tourism is sort of slowed down in South Africa, and we're not getting the tours at the moment, like how do we reimagine all our assets? And in our case, our assets, one of our biggest assets is our staff, of course, and our physical assets.
But are you seeing a big pickup in staycations? Because surely that's going to be something like, because you said, I mean, you're going into your summer, and you're going into the sort of holiday season, the Christmas coming up, things like that. Are you seeing a pickup in staycations, families, and then allowing? Because one of the things was the dorm rooms allowed families to sort of have an affordable holiday.
So I think. So just my own sort of conversations with people in the industry is that outlying areas, so Franschhoek, Stellenbosch, like areas that are outside of the city, did really well in September. I mean, there are a few sort of cottages and sort of destination places outside of town, maybe an hour and a half outside of town. I was speaking to one the other day, they're booked out until May next year. Like you can't get one night there until May next year. So I think that people are wanting to get out of the city. In terms of our bookings in Cape Town, we're getting inquiries, not actual bookings yet. But I think that there are rumblings, like the numbers are picking up again, and the media is starting to cover the fact that Western Cape, which is where we are, is starting to pick up again. And while our presidency is adamant we're not going to have a second lockdown because the economy can't sustain it.
Yeah, no, can't be sustained.
Can't afford it. Yeah, and so there's like we will absolutely not have a second lockdown. Everyone, the citizens need to be conscious and wear a mask, etc. I think there always is that fear that if I book a holiday in Cape Town over Christmas and New Year's, maybe the bars will be closed, maybe the restaurants will be closed, maybe the beaches will be closed, and then what's the point of being in a different city?
Cape Town,
yeah, because Cape Town is all about those kind of experiences. And actually, I think interesting, like I heard this amazing interview the other day about the experience economy. versus the no-touch economy. And it's actually something I wanted to touch on today. We've just emerged from the experience economy, which for me is like was so exciting, where you move from the product economy to the services economy to the experiences economy. So a year ago, all the conferences we were at, they were talking about how do you make an experience? How do you, what's your user journey? What's your customer journey like? And what is the experience that you're offering them? Okay, fine, they've got a room and a bed, but there are thousands of those. Like, what's the unique experience you can offer? And kind of post now in this like post-experience world, the new sort of catchphrase that was being discussed was a no-touch experience. So how do you create an experience that is social and experiential without, with no touch?
That kills me.
It does, I know, but in a way, like when I think about the option of like taking away cash apps and all that, and taking away like all the paper that we use when we print sheets, like how do we reimagine our hospitality spaces without like fully embracing technology? And personally, I've waited, I think, too long to embrace every aspect of that. But I think this is a really exciting time to start reimagining that. So how do we start, like, how do we give that essential like hostel experience or traveler experience with less touch
points?
Yeah,
and it was
touch points. Yeah.
I don't like the no touch, like the no hugs and no, it's great to see you and
especially in your 20s, right? I mean, that's like basically, youth.
Yeah. And I've belief in hostels, that's where people meet and they hopefully maybe even meet future partners. But anyway, Trey, very early on, there was a webinar I went to, and it said how COVID's going to push forward, and it goes to what you say. It's going to push forward some of the ideas, technology that was there that now has really come to the front. So like getting the entrance code for the dorm on your phone, on your mobile phone, or as you said, cashless systems, or I can't remember. It's only now that when you speak about it that I remember that there was a webinar, and some other things that they were saying that it's going to push that forward. All that COVID's done is changed or pushed these things forward. So we were looking at last year, and we had already committed to it, but I don't know, you've probably heard of GoKey, where you get rather than getting a key card now, and we were doing that any which way, but all that is going to be pushed so much more forward. More people are going to commit to those less touch points, I think. But I hope the hugging and the beer swigging and the meeting at the bar and the social experience of hostels is so important that I'd hate to see that go. And I'd hate, the idea of only being 3 to a table or 2 to a table. I hope that's not here to stay.
Yeah, totally. I mean, there was a nightclub in Cape Town about a month ago where 62 people got infected in one night in COVID. And I mean, I used to hang out at that nightclub when I was 19, or 18. Like, it's like super, I want to say like authentic, kind of dodgy, but cool. And I mean, like, I just can't imagine the end of my high school without that place, Yeah. And so, yes, maybe it doesn't have the most stringent like COVID protocols, but it's so difficult. I mean, if you're talking about a nightclub where people are defining themselves and finding out who they are as young people and going there to drink and they probably gain more confidence through drinking, make new friends, it is so tricky. But I think being transparent about the protocols is really important, because being on a watch list, when I heard you say that, I was like, oh my gosh, that would be terrifying to me. Like having the police coming in and checking every so often.
They came in undercover. And it was terrifying, because if we didn't do things right, they would there's no messing with the Dutch. The everything is clear beforehand. It's clear beforehand, and it's and then you abide by those regulations. But it was, they were undercover, and it was done, and we applied them, and then we came off the watch list. So it was very easy and clear and transparent. It was just, I suppose, we just weren't policing it, because it isn't in our nature, I think, in hostels to police things. Hostels are much more flexible, sort of easygoing environments. So obviously that, when you're on a watch list, you change that, and it was a couple of weeks and we've come off it. But obviously you keep the regulations then, because it's for real, so. But it's.
And with the regulations, like, was there a guideline that was issued to you? Where did you, because I mean, literally, when we were starting that journey out, I literally had about 40 WhatsApp groups as a resource and government websites. And I was sort of just really hoping and praying that we're doing it right. I mean, I still think we could be doing it better. But it's like a bit of information here, a bit of information there, a bit of a checklist here, a bit of a thing there. Like, do you have a sort of one-stop shop where you got everything?
I don't know, actually, is the honest truth, Kim, because the operations director has been dealing with it a lot. But I'm guessing that no, there was no clear, defined, particular place. So something, particularly in the beginning. Probably now it's different. So for instance, you talked about 50% occupancy in the rooms. It's not that we have to be at 50% occupancy in the rooms. It's that we have to have 1 meter apart, or 1.5 meters apart. So then you go, okay, well then this is the occupancy in the room. Whereas in Ireland, it's slightly different. They're going, this is the square meterage. This is how many people can be in a venue. So it might be only 2 people that are allowed in a venue. So I'd say, at a guess, that the Dutch are very clear now, and there is probably a one-stop shop, but in the beginning, no. And then in the UK, nothing's. It just doesn't come naturally to Boris, to be clear. So that is, and unfortunately as well, the way they've dealt with it in the UK, it's so last minute that as a business, you can't prepare for it. So unfortunately, we've had to make staff redundant in the UK because we had no clarity about what government support we would get. And maybe if we had had more clarity, because now they've changed it again, maybe if we had more clarity 6 weeks ago, we wouldn't have had to make so many redundancies in the UK. But there was such a lack of clarity that, we had to take matters into our own hands. And I think as a family business, we've been avoiding redundancies all the way along. But it got to a point that we could no longer do it. And I really like the idea of what you were saying about how you've supported staff and maybe taking their skills and using them in different areas other than hospitality. And I think that's very kind and supportive. And I don't know if that's something we have in place, but it's definitely, after listening to you, something that I'm going to inquire back, but unfortunately we've had to make redundancies in the UK. So to answer your question, has there been one clear place? Not in the beginning, probably at a guess now in the Netherlands, yes, and probably at a guess in the UK, still a bit, picking and choosing. So you made the point, you hope you do it right. And I think that's, what we are hoping too, that we're doing it right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, as part of Ubuntu Beds, we started doing post-stay cleans with sort of professional companies. And in fact, one of the cleaning companies we use is owned by a woman called Carla, who actually owns hostels. And so she took all her cleaning team and started a cleaning company and does like the whole hazmat suit, and they come and do COVID swabs and they like give you reports. And I was so intrigued, like at the beginning in March when we did the test, we tested it at once, and our rooms had been empty for about 2 weeks. So we'd been completely empty, and they came and did a swab in a few rooms. And there were like 270 particles per centimeter, whatever, of COVID in some of the rooms. So it's not enough to get infected. So it was like, 400 or whatever is how much you need to get infected, but there were traces. And it just completely made me rethink, like each person who had been there in like the weeks preceding that was like a bit of a ticking time bomb, really. Like, for the weeks leading up to the lockdown in South Africa, we probably had hundreds of COVID positive travelers staying with us, but it was just like not even on our radar. So super interesting. I mean, like in Cape Town, in the public hospitals, 40% of patients who've been tested have COVID antibodies already in public hospitals. So like, I think that it has been a lot more widespread than we actually even know, which is so fascinating. Yeah, but I mean, like I went on a trip with my family and we stayed at a lodge that had like no protocols in place. And we were the first in the morning to come to the buffet. We were like leaving early, and my little 4-year-old was eating and he wanted more yogurt, and we were sitting right next to the buffet table. So he like jumped up. I'm like, put on your mask, as he's running the 1.5 or 2 meters between the buffet table and he got to the buffet table and he just went, achoo! And he sneezed like all over the buffet. And I'm like, oh my God, no one saw, we're the only ones here. Like that was so embarrassing. And I just thought, oh my God, like if he had COVID, this is just such a nightmare. Like, and you could see like the lodge staff were so stoked to have people there, but like the buffet was set up like normal, like any other day, and no one was, and like every second waitress was wearing a mask, and it was just like, oh yeah, like as you say, like policing it it's not in our nature. Angie, you had a question?
Okay, thank you so much for that informative session. There's a question here for Anne. Do your cities have facilities for foreigners to isolate?
Okay, yes, I couldn't read and so I was trying to multitask, but it wasn't succeeding, but I saw a question. So in London, obviously we're closed, so there's no need for it and everything. In Amsterdam, actually, we're so there was one group coming to us, and we have a very small, we have 3 hostels in Amsterdam. We just acquired 2 of them just pre-COVID, which was Eco and Coco Mama. Lovely holidays, they were lovely hostels, but one is very small. Coco Mama is only 18 beds. So, and Clink Nord itself is 800 beds. So that particular group we put into Coco Mama, they quarantined and then they came and then stayed with Clink because it was a long-term stay. But at the moment that's not happening, and I just but we're using another hostel that is I don't know how their facilities are set up, but they have facilities set up that people can come quarantine and then come on to us. So but I only heard about that this morning, so I don't know the exact details of that, so I can get back to somebody, the person that asked the question. So there is the possibility to quarantine. We had in a smaller hostel, we're not doing that still, and we're putting them into a competitor, or a friendly competitor's hostel. So but if it can be done there, I'm not sure why it can't be done with us. But yes, there's a 10-day quarantine period in the Netherlands. So that is one of the issues, or has been one of the issues all along with travelers. And that's why I think there's no short stay travelers. It's more about long-term travelers.
Yeah.
So I haven't answered that question precisely, I realize. But we don't have exact facilities, but we have means to facilitate, is probably the best way to answer that.
Yeah. So please, attendees, if there's any other questions, please post them in the chat so we can ask. I think we have about 10 more minutes left of this webinar. So please ask. Okay, so there's another question. what I think it's for Kim. So what would you do different this time? So let's say, you know, there's always rumors going around in South Africa that a second lockdown is coming. What would you do different this time? How would you prepare different?
So I think one of the things that I did poorly the first time round was communicate a lot online. So I think one of the first departments to like shut down at once was our marketing department. And so and then when it was only me left, and I haven't done the social media in so long, and I haven't done, you know, all our communications in so long, that I just sort of froze in the headlights and just went like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to do anything. And I think now sort of knowing what we're in for and knowing what is happening, I would take a page out of other people's books and communicate better. For example, when we were open for essential services, like I would have put that on our website, like first thing, we are open for essential services. You can call us any time of day and night.
Yeah.
I think communicate better with the fact that we are open. Maybe, also just be way more open-minded about the type of traveler who we can accommodate. Maybe be a bit more ballsy with our rates. I think for a long time I was a bit like sort of deer in the headlight and just didn't change anything. And so I think now, you know, kind of I would definitely try again to trial out different rates and try out different markets, etc. I think that's sort of my what I would do differently if I could go back and have and clone me and tell the other me to get to work. I think that's what I would do.
Okay, and Anne mentioned that she had like you know, guests staying and showing symptoms, whether it was at a property or before. Have you had a similar experience, Kim? You know, especially since you're hosting essential workers as well.
So we haven't actually had an experience like that yet, but we've had it at school. So in fact, we had it on Monday. My daughter was turned away from the dentist because she had a temperature of 38. It was a very, very hot day. So we just gave her a glass of water and waited 5 minutes, and then she retested and it was okay. But, you know, in that case, she would have just had to go home and forfeit her dentist appointment. In the case of someone actually arriving and having a temperature and us saying, no, you cannot come in, you know, we can't grant you access. It has been a question that's come up a lot, and what we are brainstorming at the moment, much like Anne said, is having partners close by who can accommodate quarantine or even COVID suspected guests. So, you know, off the top of my head, we have been working with Airbnb to access some of their apartments. So personally, I was in quarantine for 14 days before lockdown started, and I think the greatest thing was being in a place where there's a kitchen and a lounge and a bedroom. I think it's quite, I mean, our rooms are like 16 square meters. To quarantine in such a small space is quite difficult. So I would definitely use the Ubuntu Beds network and access accommodations that are suitable for someone to stay long enough. I think if someone is showing symptoms and say 10 days, I think in South Africa now it's also 10 days or 7 days, I can't remember offhand. So I think creating those strategic alliances and using networks of people who we know are open and willing to help is really useful. So especially the smaller properties.
Yeah, definitely. And so Kim mentioned that she's like running on skeleton staff. Are you kind of doing the same, or is your staff at full capacity?
So the way the government aid worked in both the UK and the way it worked in the Netherlands was we had to keep all staff employed to get the full government aid. So that was a great thing. And I thought that was, and apparently this is an idea that came from Germany after the last financial crisis. So it's meant that the ambers have been burning the whole time in the Netherlands. And admittedly, when we were down around 8%, the staff were, you know, I think they were dirty and things so they could clean them up again. They were, you know, bored senseless, but it just kept the momentum going. In the UK, for a long time, the government scheme was, so in order to protect our staff as much as possible, because it wouldn't be a good time to get a job, we put them on a furlough scheme. And the furlough scheme in the UK means that staff can't work at all, but they were getting 80% of their wages. So it was, we felt it was more justifiable to keep them on the furlough scheme. Whilst we were paying 20% of the wages and the government was paying 80%, they couldn't do anything. But the chances of getting another job at that time were very, very difficult. So we've, and only recently then have we made the UK staff redundant. We've brought it down to a skeleton staff, but we're closed, and the government scheme also stopped. But to answer your question, in the Netherlands, no, we didn't need to go down to a skeleton staff, because the whole idea was that you would only get the government support if you kept everybody employed.
Yeah. Okay.
But without the support in the UK, without the support in the UK now, we've had to go to a skeleton staff.
Okay. Yeah. And when it comes to like the checking in procedure, so are you doing that differently? Are you, you know, trying to be more contactless, or you know, in South Africa we have like screens and gloves and masks and all of those. Are you doing something similar?
Yeah, so we have screens and we have masks. I don't think we've got gloves yet, actually, which is really interesting. And I've heard actually I heard yesterday, the most COVID unfriendly place or where COVID is happiest is apparently the pin pad on the on your credit card machine is the pin pad thing. That's apparently the most COVID what's the word, infected place. But yes, we had the screens, we have you know, masks. Yeah, we've applied all the standard measures, and so it has changed a bit. And oh yeah, sorry. And I also touched on earlier that but this was pre-COVID, we were going to do this any which way. We've gone with a system that allows you to check into the room without needing a key card. It's on your phone. So there's less, minimizing the touch points really. Yeah.
Okay. So no keys at the moment. Okay.
Oh no, sorry. Actually, that system hasn't been fully, I think it's recently been fully automated, but we had to put it all in any which way. But it's so up until now, yeah, we have been still working with the key cards, but I think it's going to be a plus factor in this sort of new age of less touching of COVID.
Yeah. And yeah, in South Africa, so what they do with the credit card machines is they put like plastic over so that they can like sanitize it after each use, which seems to be working.
Yeah. I do wonder. I suppose the big thing then is to keep to washing your hands, which is, but if you've got a shortage of water, which you have been having in Cape Town, then it's a bit trickier. But here we're obsessed with washing our hands now.
Yeah, I think the water shortage is under control. Hopefully it stays that way. So
thank goodness. I think Anne will remember a few years ago after a conference, I asked her if I can please come over to her house for a bath. And she
I wasn't going to bring that up here.
She was like, why? I barely know you. And I was like, I haven't had a bath in 6 months. We have a water shortage and I just really want a bath. She was like, okay.
And every so often my two daughters ask when I'm talking about Kim, they're like, who's Kim? And I go, oh, she's the lady that came over for the bath. Oh yeah, that was a bit strange.
Funny.
So you'll never have a water shortage in Ireland, I promise you. Come visit us in Ireland.
Very lucky. Okay. So just once again, thank you so much for our speakers for joining us today and, sharing all your insights and experiences, and hopefully it can help some of our properties, as well prepare a bit, or taking, at least some tips to implement in their properties as well.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.